everyone. Hope you're having a good Wednesday so far. We'll give everyone a couple minutes to join, and then we'll get started. But thank you for being here today. We're trying a few exciting new things where we're sharing some music and sharing a title slide. So hope everyone is enjoying our new features. We'll give everyone maybe till about 2:04 Eastern, and we can get started here. Cool. We've got a pretty good turnout so far, everyone. Thank you. We'll give everyone maybe one more minute, and then we'll jump into this. Alrighty. Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and get started, and we'll add people to the waiting room as we go. But yeah, thank you so much for being here, everyone. As you hopefully saw on our lovely new title slide, this is our latest Funder Farm Bill chat or Funder Farm Bill platforms from the field webinar. Today, we're really excited to have a bunch of very great speakers from CSPI, which is Citizens for Science and the Public Interest, Fair Food Network, which is a member of ours, and the Bipartisan Policy Center. And we're going to be talking about all of the nutrition programs in the Farm Bill, which we're really, really excited about. And we're also excited, this is one of the first Funder Farm Bill chats that we've been able to co-host with a different organization. So we're really excited that our friends at Grantmakers and Health are co-hosting this webinar with us. Colin Peckrin is here. So I will quickly introduce myself. I'll do our land acknowledgement, then I'll let Colin introduce himself. We'll introduce our speakers. Then I'm going to provide a quick bit of background on kind of the variety of programs that are in the Farm Bill related to nutrition, and then we'll dive right into things with our speakers. So again, hey everyone, I'm Maggie Mascarenas. You may have seen my emails around. I'm the Public Policy Associate at SAFSF, Sustainable Agriculture and Food Systems Funders. Again, thank you so much for being here today. And yeah, we're really, really excited to be able to focus on nutrition today. So I'm going to jump into our land acknowledgement, and then, like I said, I'll pass it over to you, Colin. So as funders and advocates working to create a more equitable U.S. agriculture and food system, SAFSF believes it is imperative for us to acknowledge that the roots of today's inequities lie deep in the history of land theft and dispossession from Indigenous peoples. I'm based in Charlottesville, Virginia, and Monacan and Monhoac land. As you introduce yourselves in the chat, we encourage you to acknowledge the traditional Indigenous inhabitants of the land you are on and to learn more about that history. You can find maps and more resources about the land you're on at the links that Holly is going to drop into the chat. So thanks again, and I'll pass it over to you, Colin.
Well, great. Well, thank you, Maggie. Hello, everybody. My name is Colin Peckrin. I am a program director here at Grantmakers and Health. We are based in Washington, D.C., and so we are on traditional Piscataway lands here. We are really excited to be hosting this as part of a policy series that we're doing around food access and nutrition, thanks to support from the Kresge Foundation, and are always happy to be partnering with our friends at Sustainable Ag and Food Systems Funders on calls like this. So very excited to be here. Glad to see a lot of our funding partners on this call. And for now, I guess I'll pass it back to you, Maggie, to introduce our speakers.
Yeah, thank you so much. And instead of reading everyone's bio, which I know can get a little bit old and boring, I'm going to pass it to each of our three speakers and just ask you to share a little bit about your background, your job, what you do in your organization, and also maybe a little bit about what brought you to the work. So I will pass it to you first, Mark.
Great, thanks, Maggie. Good afternoon, everybody. Great to be here. I'm Mark Nicholson, the Senior Director of Policy for Fair Food Network. Based in Washington, D.C. As you know, Fair Food Network's based in Michigan, where we operate the Double Up Food Bucks program. And I came to this work in a kind of indirect way. I actually came out of more of production agriculture, and as well as trade association work. And at one point, I actually, on the farm, family farm side, was selling produce to a food bank that was taking our products, putting them on a mobile truck and bringing them back to our community into food deserts, where they were selling them with a Double Up program. And it wasn't until I took this job, which kind of came to me through a serendipitous route, that I actually heard about these programs and knew that from the production side, from the local regional producer side, that they were supporting my business. So very happy to be doing this work that's supporting very broad stakeholder communities, and very happy to be here today with you to share what's going on in Washington, specifically around nutrition incentives.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mark. And I will pass it to you, Joelle.
Hi, good morning, everybody. It's great to be here today and to meet all of you. My name is Joelle Johnson, and I am the campaign manager for Healthy Food Access at the Center for Science and the Public Interest. We are based in Washington, D.C., so we're also on Piscataway native lands. We are a consumer advocacy organization. We work on a wide variety of food nutrition related issues, but my portfolio specifically includes work on SNAP and the charitable food system. So lots of relevant work for the upcoming Farm Bill. And I come to this work by way of more programmatic food system work, actually. So for folks in DC, I used to be the procurement person for DC Central Kitchen, working on a local food procurement program for their school foods program. I also ran some food education programs over there, and then previously worked for a food education program that was based on a farm in Louisville, Kentucky. And so after enough kind of direct service work and lots of fundraising hustling, I decided to shift over to the policy side of things, to try to kind of expand the impact of that work. And have been with CSPI for 7 years now. So clearly it was a good fit. But yeah, really glad to be here today and looking forward to sharing about our work on the Farm Bill. Thanks, Maggie.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Joelle. It was fun to learn a little bit more about your background and history. And now I will pass it to our third and final speaker for the day, Anand.
Great. Well, thanks so much. Thanks to the Sustainable Agriculture team and GIH as well for convening us. My name is Anand Parikh. I'm the Chief Medical Advisor at the Bipartisan Policy Center. We are a nonprofit organization in Washington, D.C. that tries to take the best ideas from both sides to promote health, security, and opportunity. We're about 15 years old, founded by 4 former Senate Majority Leaders. And I would say really for the last 10 years, have an active work stream in the areas of food and ag and nutrition and obesity, looking at the economic and environmental drivers of many of these things. And I obviously have a particular sort of health interest as well, given that poor diet is now the leading risk factor for mortality in the United States. So we've done a fair bit of work, and our audience is Congress. We are a 501c3. We have a 501c4 organization, BPC Action, that we work closely with as well. But we really try to come up with recommendations and ideas and solutions for both sides of the aisle on critical issues such as this. By background, I'm a physician. Internal medicine is my specialty, and served in government for a decade prior to that. So really happy to be here with all of you, and looking forward to today's discussion.
Fantastic. Thank you so much to all three of you for being here today and sharing your time with us. I'm really excited to learn from your presentations today. So as I mentioned, I'm just going to talk for a few minutes about to provide a little bit of information about the variety of programs related to food and nutrition that are in the Farm Bill. And then, like I said, I'll pass it to Colin, and then we'll get into our speaker presentations. We will have a Q&A section for about the last, hopefully 25-30 minutes of the call. So if you do have questions, please pop them in the chat as we go, and we will make sure that they get answered. And since we have a good number of folks on today, but not too many, it would be great. We'll kind of invite you to come off of mute and ask your question as well. So yeah, I'll get started. I just, again, wanted to provide a little bit of a grounding about the programs that we're going to be talking about today. So as you know, and have probably heard a lot about, the Farm Bill does include the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. And of course, that gets a lot of discussion in Congress, and there's been a lot of discussion in the news about the SNAP program that we'll get into today. But I also just wanted to provide a little bit of background on the other programs that are included in the nutrition, in the Farm Bill, in the nutrition title, and more broadly. So the Farm Bill also includes nutrition assistant program grants for several U.S. territories, including Puerto Rico, the food distribution program on Indian reservations, the commodity supplemental food program, which provides a sort of shelf-stable package of foods for seniors that are 60 and over. I actually used to work at a food bank before this and managed the CSPI program, and happy to talk more about the ins and outs of that program. It's a fascinating one. The Farm Bill also includes the Emergency Food Assistance Program, or TFAP, which is kind of the main way that commodity foods are distributed to food banks. And it is a very significant portion of food distributed at food banks across the country. The Farm Bill includes community food project funding, funding for the Senior Farmers Market Nutrition Program, funding for the Schumacher Nutrition Incentive Program, which is a really wonderful program that I know Mark is going to talk a lot more about today. The Fresh Fruits and Vegetable Program, which helps elementary schools across the country provide more fruits and vegetables, and the Healthy Food Financing Initiative, which is a program funded by USDA Rural Development. So yeah, I just wanted to give you a little bit of background on the really true variety of programs that we're going to be talking about today. And then I will pass it to you, Colin, to provide us a little bit more grounding information.
Well, sure. Thank you, Maggie. So as you just heard, and by the wide variety of speakers and people that are in the call today, you can imagine that there are a lot of interests coming from many different sectors when it comes to the Farm Bill. I think for many years, especially those of us on the public healthcare side of things, it was easy to write the Farm Bill off as, well, that's just, all about, subsidies. It's all about, what producers care about. Maybe there's a little bit of nutrition in there with SNAP, but it's it's something that we don't really have to pay attention to. But I think certainly over the years, a lot more interests are now aligning and are in some ways, unfortunately, competing that maybe perhaps should be working together to really be furthering a lot of common interests. So while you may have farmers, producers involved, obviously now you're seeing a lot of healthcare organizations and people within the healthcare sector are really starting to pay attention, especially now that you're starting to see food access is really part of the social determinants of health landscape. Anti-hunger advocates are certainly very much involved in this. I know, Maggie, you can easily smile nod at that, having been coming from that sector. And oftentimes those that are working in healthcare and anti-hunger don't always see eye to eye when it comes to policy and program. And then you obviously get into distributors. Obviously, schools, childcare sectors are obviously very interested in a lot of the provisions within the Farm Bill and the nutrition provisions. And then you can get into retail, emergency food. There are just, that's just I think just maybe the bulk of it. There's certainly a lot of other interests involved. And as Maggie alluded to, certainly a lot of these nutrition components within the Farm Bill become quite politicized. It's pretty hard not to have seen in the news that there are certain politicians and interests that would like to see these types of provisions reduced or altered in ways that may or may not benefit communities. And so this is really an opportunity, even if you on this call aren't going to be getting directly involved with advocacy or with what's happening with the Farm Bill. A lot of the conversations and a lot of the interests that are making their voices heard are going to be the same types of community organizations and partners that you all work with back in your local communities. And so hopefully today you'll get a good sense of sort of what those conversations are, where the focus is, where the puck may be going on a lot of these conversations, and hopefully at the very least they'll help prepare you to help work with your community stakeholders and your grantees to be better prepared for what we will see down the road with the Farm Bill. But with that, I think Mark, you're going to be kicking us off on this conversation, and I'm just excited to hear what you, Joel, and Anand have to say about what your organizations are thinking about.
Great, thank you, Colin. Wonderful. I'm going to share my screen here, or attempt to. All right, Maggie, if you want to give me a thumbs up if we're good there.
You're good to go.
Awesome, fantastic. All right. Well, I was given about 15 minutes. I did time this a little on practice. I should be able to come within that, but if you need to get the hook out for me, let me know, Maggie. So thank you for the opportunity to share information about fruit and vegetable nutrition incentives. Really quick, I did just want to start with a little bit of a refresher on Fair Food Network for folks that know us. I would, assuming most folks do, but wanted to share just some updated kind of overview on the organization and the work we're doing. Just in general, we are very focused on food and how resources flow through the food economy to build equity in communities across the country. And we're doing that with, 3 different strategy areas in financial investing, capacity building, and policy advocacy. And as many of you know, we have a couple core programs, one of which is nutrition incentives, but we also are doing impact investing work. So just wanted to give that real quick kind of overview on some of the things we're doing. And I think that definitely is one thing about Fair Food Network and our policy work that differentiates us a bit in that we're implementing programs and innovating solutions on the ground and then trying to scale those up through policy work. And so turning to policy work, I wanted to cover a couple things to give you some understanding of what we're engaging in for the Farm Bill. And it's specifically for fruit and vegetable incentives. And just to provide a little more context on that, when we talk about fruit and vegetable incentives, we're really talking about 2 separate programs that are rolled into the Schumacher Nutrition Incentive Program in the Farm Bill. Those 2 programs are the SNAP retail incentives for fruit and vegetables, and also produce prescriptions. So 2 separate programs operated a little differently in USDA's implementation, but all under GusNIP. So I wanted to start at a fairly high level here on some of the things that, as I'm working on these issues in Washington, that are impacting some of the legislative strategies and some of the thinking about how we're approaching nutrition incentives in the Farm Bill. First, just from that broad policy landscape overview, the fact that we have a divided Congress with very, very thin margins in the House and Senate are really going to be impacting how this Farm Bill is created and how folks are going about getting their priorities into the Farm Bill. But before we're even really engaging in detail on the Farm Bill, we have this issue of the debt ceiling and the budget negotiations that are going on around that. And so if you followed anything in the news in the last couple of days, you are seeing, Speaker McCarthy's speech on Wall Street just yesterday, some of the responses to that, where they're really trying to include negotiations around SNAP in the debt ceiling negotiations around the budget. What's interesting about how this is playing out, however, is that unlike, say, the Farm Bill, which we know expires in the end of this fiscal year, so the end of September, this debt ceiling X date is uncertain. We really don't know when we'll run out of money to pay our national debt. The expectation is that in August, this was going to be when we had to move, make the changes. But just some recent conversations, and even with tax day being yesterday and early indications that some of the revenues would be down, the suggestion is this might be in June now. So it's very interesting to see how the House is trying to get to a point on negotiations on the budget and using the debt ceiling as leverage for that. So that's playing out, and the issue of SNAP is in that. And you're hearing folks like the chairman of the House Ag Committee, G.T. Thompson, saying, I'd much rather have this discussion around SNAP be in the Farm Bill, which is the authorizing legislation for the program. But that's not really in his hands at this point. So that is certainly one component of policy that's going on here in the city, some policy landscape that's really impacting what's being done on the Farm Bill and how both chambers are approaching it at this point. And the other thing is that, we are heading into an election cycle, and the 2024 will be a presidential election. That's playing out already with, in particular with senators that are in competitive districts. There's a number of Democratic senators that are in competitive districts. And so you're going to see them reacting to major legislation with a mind towards their reelection campaigns in 24. So that's just a real quick, just sharing some of that general landscape that's impacting, in particular, the nutrition title in the Farm Bill. More specifically to the Farm Bill landscape, certainly the ability to increase funding or fund new programs is a challenge in this Farm Bill. Most people's starting point is that it's going to be very difficult to even expand or increase funding for programs. The other impact that folks are looking at is the increases in SNAP spending over the course of the pandemic, and also through the permanent increase that came through the reevaluation of the Thrifty Food Plan. That's been under a lot of scrutiny in hearings to date, and will continue to be something that folks will be looking at. Just that overall spending of SNAP, the impact it had on the Congressional Budget Office projections for nutrition spending going forward. So a lot of sensitivity around, what percent of the Farm Bill nutrition is, and what percent of the Farm Bill SNAP is. In the past, that's been about 75%, and it's now projected to be closer to 80%. So that is something that, when you're dealing with the Farm Bill, is on folks' radar. While there's some of those headwinds, there's also, I think, some positive things that we're hearing with regard to the nutrition title, and that is, there's been strong commitments from the ag community well, first of all, there's been commitments from leaders in both chambers to get the Farm Bill done this year. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it's September when it expires. I think folks are thinking by the end of the year that would be something that they would complete. But the other thing we're hearing is from the agriculture community. We're hearing from American Farm Bureau that the nutrition title needs to be a strong title to pass a Farm Bill. So major agriculture groups have been signaling that they don't want to see a battle around SNAP in the nutrition title because they know that jeopardizes the ability to pass one, particularly through the Senate, which is controlled by the Democrats at this point. So shifting to nutrition incentives. Again, it's the fruit and vegetable incentives through the Schumacher Nutrition Incentive Program, which are in the nutrition title. That was funded at $250 million in the last Farm Bill, received permanent baseline funding, and also created a National Technical Assistance and Evaluation Center. So we have a lot of things that were achieved in the last Farm Bill. The 2023 Farm Bill will be the fourth Farm Bill for nutrition incentives. Fair Food Network has been organizing around this for a while, knowing that nutrition incentives have a broad stakeholder community. The program has impacts in public health, anti-hunger, agriculture, at the retail level and local economy levels, as well as for impacted communities. And so knowing that heading into the Farm Bill, there will be a lot of interested stakeholders, we developed the Alliance for National Nutrition Incentives with the intent of, really, I guess, kind of herding the cats here in Washington to make sure as we all go to the Hill and talk about GusNIP, we have an opportunity to identify common priorities and advance those collectively. So this is just a quick rundown of the list of folks that are participating in that now. And also we've been able to add a number of states that are participating in a coalition focused on statewide expansion. So they're listed here as well. So what are the GusNIP Farm Bill priorities? So the Alliance for National Nutrition Incentives, Annie, has identified a couple of top priorities. Of course, as I said, this Farm Bill is a challenging one to try and expand funding, but that happens to be one of our top priorities. And the way we're approaching that is really identifying the impacts the program is having. The National Evaluation Center has done research that indicates participants in these programs are consuming more fruits and vegetables than the average American. And so we have a really huge impact that many folks have been trying to achieve. And the challenge now is how do you scale those impacts? And those impacts are not just being felt for individuals with low income, but also for producers of these products and for the local economies where those dollars are being spent. We're also seeking to eliminate or reduce the non-federal matching requirement. The SNAP nutrition incentive component requires a 1-for-1 match. Many of you are aware of this. Many of you have participated in funding these programs, which has been just a critical part of their ability to prove the concept. But now when it comes to scaling them, really increasing the federal share of that program cost is a top priority. And then we're also looking to create a new grant tier for statewide expansion because the focus to date has been testing, trying the programs, proving concept, and really now getting USDA to kind of shift its mindset to scaling the programs as part of the priorities we're setting forward. And then finally, certainly renewing the commitment to local producers and independent grocers who have been a core part of getting this program launched and really a place we want to maintain a focus on those impacts. And Maggie, how am I doing with time?
Doing pretty good. You can keep going.
Awesome, thank you. Just a couple more slides. I really appreciate it. So very quickly, what is our strategy? We've got our priorities, we've got our, grass tops, stakeholders organized. So how are we going about getting some of these really big objectives into the Farm Bill? For one thing, we did bring on strategic guidance and advisors. So adding to our DC-based lobbying and strategic capacity through the Tory Advisory Group. So that's one thing that we've done, and that they're helping to advise our work in the Alliance on the Hill and then with key stakeholders. We are very focused on a bipartisan approach. That process takes more time. You're seeing a lot of marker bills out there, those initial legislation that gets wrapped into the Farm Bill. But to get the work done, to do that in a bipartisan way takes a little bit longer, and we're engaged in that, both in the House and Senate right now. And we're seeing some progress there. So we're hopeful that, in May, that we'll see some marker language with Republican and Democratic co-sponsors for GusNIP in the House and Senate. And then, we'll be looking for broad stakeholder support, and those are going to be opportunities where folks from this community can sign on in support of the marker bills or the priorities that we're advancing. And then we're going to be doing grassroots advocacy as well. And there's a really, all of those stakeholders bring their own grassroots. GusNIP has, a huge grassroots network. These programs are active in nearly every state. Grantees have their statewide coalitions they put together for these. So there's going to be a lot of work, really kind of kicking off in June when grantees are going to convene in Washington, D.C. for the hub for the national convening of grantees is going to provide an opportunity for us to hit the Hill, and we'll be helping to get folks ready and organized for that. And then finally, the end game, right? The end game is to be included in the draft legislation. Some folks anticipated this timeframe would be as early as June, and we're hearing obviously that's coming up fast. And so we're hearing that from committees that July is probably more likely for drafting of Farm Bill legislation. But really the ultimate goal here is when we get to committee, when we get the House version and Senate version and to the conference committee, that we are able to get the priorities in there that we're looking for and the funding increases. So really that's kind of the end game. So I just want to wrap up by just, sharing some opportunities for funders to consider down the road. This could be an extended Farm Bill campaign. Anything beyond September, I think, is going to be a point where we're going to be looking to advance and enhance the work of the Alliance. And if it goes beyond December, it wouldn't be the first time that a Farm Bill has been extended and then gone into the next year. That's certainly going to extend, those needs for keeping these advocacy efforts going. And then, we're asking questions around, should Annie continue after the Farm Bill through implementation? And, what kind of role can an alliance like Annie play when in getting ready for the next Farm Bill? Because ultimately the long-term goal for the nutrition incentives is to really make this a more permanent part of SNAP and make and provide these impacts and access much more broadly across the country. So I know I didn't really pause for a breath for most of that, but I was trying to make sure I was conscientious of the time. So I really appreciate the opportunity to share this and look forward to questions after the additional presentations. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mark, for sharing. I think that was a really great overview of kind of where we are, in the Farm Bill debate process. And I think another really great reminder, again, that, Farm Bill work on the Farm Bill doesn't necessarily end when the Farm Bill is passed. There's a lot of continuous work to be done on implementation. So that's definitely a point that Tracy and I want to continue to make. So again, thank you so much. And I think Joelle, you're up next.
Great, thanks, Maggie. Let me just get my slides up. Are you seeing the correct version, Maggie?
It looks like we're seeing the presenter view, but if you hit that display settings, yeah, there you go. Perfect. Thanks so much.
That's good. Okay. All right. Well, hi, everybody. Glad to have the opportunity today to share about CSPI's Farm Bill work with our focus specifically on improving food nutrition security through SNAP. So a little bit of what overview of what I'm going to cover today. So a little background on CSPI and who we are, as well as the NANA Coalition. Talking about some of the work that we've done over the past couple of years to really try to center the priorities of people with lived expertise with SNAP in our policy our policy priority setting. Go over what the Farm Bill priorities are for CSPI and for NANA, and then talk about some advocacy and funding opportunities. So we are Center for Science in the Public Interest. We are a consumer advocacy organization founded in 1971. We're based in Washington, D.C., so we've been around for a long time. We are a nonprofit, and our mission is to advocate for science-based policies and consumer education. We always like to note that we're an independent consumer voice, which means that we don't take any corporate donations or government grants. And by not taking that money, it allows us to really share unbiased nutrition information with the public, which we primarily do through our health letter, which is called Nutrition Action. You can see a picture of that here. But we also do that through social media and other platforms. We listed here below on the slide, you see all of our kind of issue areas for our advocacy work. We have had, being around since 1971, we've had a hand in influencing our food system in a number of obvious and some less obvious ways. One thing that people may not know, but we were responsible years ago for getting the nutrition info panel on packaged foods. Hard to believe that there was a time when we didn't have that information at our fingertips. We also later went on to get the trans fat line added, the added sugars line added, and now more recently we're working to get label nutrition information on the front of packaged foods. Some other examples of our work include being a leading force behind the lobbying for school nutrition standards under the Obama administration through the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act. We also work on a number of other nutrition areas, including SNAP and the charitable food system. And those really kind of tie into our work on the Farm Bill. Another role that CSPI plays is we are a co-founder and leader of the nation's largest nutrition advocacy coalition called the National Alliance for Nutrition and Activity, or NANA for short. NANA is comprised of more than 500 national, state, and local organizations. We have a 13-member steering committee, which you can see bulleted on the screen here. The purpose of NANA really is to promote a better understanding of the importance of healthy eating, physical activity, and obesity prevention to the nation's health and healthcare costs. We also work to cultivate champions in Congress and federal agencies. A couple examples of the impact that NANA has had after a decade of advocacy to improve nutritional quality of school meals. The NANA Coalition, like CSPI, was very much a leader in passing the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act, which improved and reauthorized child nutrition programs. And it also included a provision to get unhealthy food and beverages out of school vending machines, a la carte lines, and other venues. And so this historic legislation really provided 31 million American students with greater access to healthy school food. We're now working on protecting that. NANA also led the effort to strengthen resources for nutrition and physical activity promotion at the CDC. So as a result of NANA's efforts, the CDC's Division of Nutrition, Physical Activity, and Obesity was able to increase their funding from $2 million per year back in 1998 to $55 million per year as of 2018. So kind of shifting back over to CSPI for a minute, and how we approach our work on the Farm Bill. We created this theory of change a few years ago to help guide our work on food access programs. So our North Star statement is that we envision a future in which SNAP supports people who are impacted by systemic inequities by ensuring that they have equitable access to a nourishing food environment and are equipped with sufficient resources to achieve optimal health and well-being. So you can see on this theory of change that advocacy is really at the heart of the work that we do. And we ultimately are trying to impact healthier food environments and make the healthy choice the easy choice. But we also want to reduce food insecurity, and we want our efforts to improve diet quality. So the strategies for achieving this are over here on the left, and include learning from and lifting up the voices of community members, supporting and conducting rigorous research, and driving corporate accountability for consumer health. We really, as an organization, have a pretty long history of rigorous research and corporate accountability work, but learning from and lifting up communities, in all honesty, is a newer area for us, and something that we're trying to place greater emphasis on as a policy making and advocacy organization, and especially as we head into the Farm Bill. So what does that look like? We developed this model of statewide community and stakeholder engagement around SNAP several years ago. Back in 2020, we became a grant-making organization for the first time ever, and we were able to give 7 community-based organizations funding to run projects where they could gather stakeholder and SNAP participant input on strategies and policies for addressing food nutrition security through SNAP. So we had, a couple of components that we wanted all the projects to include, which are in these 4 boxes here. But we also supported many of these locations as they kind of adapted this format to fit their specific needs. They learning to be very responsive to community partners and community-based organizations is a really important part of this kind of community-informed, community and driven policy making. So for example, in Texas, they have really strong a strong statewide coalition for pushing for permanent state funding for their SNAP fruit and vegetable program. And so the community engagement work that we did in Texas was a really good opportunity to learn more about what SNAP participants across the state thought about incentives. We then pulled all of the findings from these community-based organizations into individual reports for each state that provide a comprehensive list of SNAP strategy recommendations that were supported by the broad array of stakeholders that participated, but more specifically, they're supported and recommended by SNAP participants themselves. So more recently, in 2022, we have expanded this work to include US territories. So right now we're undergoing a similar community driven policy process with the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. They are one of the 3 territories that participates in NAP, which is the Nutrition Assistance Program. It's not SNAP, it's instead a block grant program that's much more restrictive than SNAP. There is some appetite in NAP territories to transition to SNAP. Specifically, Puerto Rico is one of those territories that is undergoing efforts to make that transition now. And so what we wanted to do is use some of our funds to speak to the other 2 territories, CNMI and American Samoa, to see if there's a similar desire to make a transition from NAP to SNAP. And also just to learn a little bit more about how do these federal food assistance programs work, and how do they fall short in these territories, and how can we kind of lift up as a national organization that does federal advocacy, how can we lift up the policy priorities of these territories, which I think often kind of go are not front and center. Oops. So just really quickly, these are some of the top recommendations that came out of the projects that we've done so far. Mostly the recommendations were related to increasing monthly benefit amounts, as participants felt like the current amounts were not enough to afford the food they needed for a healthy diet, and specifically wanted more money for fruits and vegetables, which could be achieved in a number of ways that are listed out here. There are some other strategies that emerged as quite popular in specific states, including coverage of hot prepared meals, expanding eligibility, changing the issuance cycle of SNAP benefits, pairing incentives for fruits and vegetables with disincentives for sugary drinks, and then streamlining benefits with other public programs like Medicaid. And all the recommendations that came out of these convenings were pretty much in line with a study that came out of USDA recently that showed that SNAP participants face barriers to healthy eating. And the number one barrier reported by SNAP participants is cost of healthy foods. So CSPI has a long list of Farm Bill priorities, and you can check the full list of those by going to our website. The link is at the bottom of the page here. And I can drop them in the chat in a little bit, but there's sort of a balance of priorities that we lead on and priorities that we support. So I'm just going to touch on the priorities that we're leading on. And these priorities were really developed based on those listening sessions, like I mentioned before: political viability, alignment with our mission and vision, alignment with our areas of expertise. I've included an asterisk next to the priorities that really came out of the community engagement work that I just touched on. So Mark already did a great job of summarizing this, so I won't spend any time on it, but we agree we want to increase the purchasing power of nutritious foods by strengthening GusNIP in all of the ways that Mark already mentioned. We also want to improve the healthfulness of the retail food environment. So that includes addressing things like SNAP retailer stocking standards, improving access to SNAP grocery delivery when shopping online, and requiring online retailers that accept SNAP to clearly and consistently display the nutrition facts panel. I also note that with stocking standards, the White House has called for the rider that's blocking USDA from strengthening stocking standards to be removed. So we are already seeing some movement on stocking standards, which seems very promising. And two more priorities: we want to invest in research to strengthen food nutrition security. USDA is already working on this, but getting a definition and metrics and reporting into the Farm Bill just really makes sure that it gets done. We also want to see more money made available for nutrition security demonstration pilots. In the 2008 Farm Bill, there was mandatory funding for the Healthy Incentives pilot, which later was very successful and later went on to become GusNIP. So there is a history of doing this in the Farm Bill. The language is actually already in it. We just need more mandatory funds available for it. So that's a big ask, given the context that Mark provided, but it's something that we're pushing for. And then finally, we want to see increased nutrition security within the charitable food system. We're recommending that culturally responsive nutrition guidelines be adopted for all USDA food distribution programs. We want to see an increase in funding for the emergency food assistance program, and more specifically, an increase in funding for the Farm to Food Bank program. Just because of time, I won't go into the details of those, but if you're interested, I can share those in the chat or follow up with you separately. Oops, sorry. And then these are NANA's Farm Bill priorities, which are somewhat in line, pretty much in line with CSPI's, but go a little bit broader. So protecting and strengthening benefit levels for and access to SNAP, improving the food environment by increasing equitable access to healthy food in stores and online. Also investing in research to improve nutrition security, and then strengthening nutrition education. These are the organizations that have signed on to this, to the NANA Farm Bill priorities so far. Though I will note that endorsement of the recommendations does not imply that these organizations have taken a position on every single recommendation. So opportunities for advocacy. I think some of the easy ways to get involved are to follow us on social media, take action on sign-on letters. If you're interested, we can always share relevant materials as we put them out. I would also recommend that you sign up for our action alerts on our website. You can see this button here. And then also, join CSPI's funding partners in supporting our advocacy efforts. So let me touch on those just a little bit. We have a number of opportunities for state and local funding, depending on the type of grant making that you do. So you could work within your community to fund advocates to host more convenings that center people with lived expertise and their policy priorities. Like I mentioned before, we've done this in 11 states so far. Increasing purchasing power for low-income families in your community by providing those matching funds for your state's successful GusNIP programs. CSPI leads technical assistance for advocates that want to improve the retail food environment in their states and localities. So that's another way to get involved. And then somewhat unconventional, but also underwriting nutrition security demonstration projects that can be evaluated, replicated, and scaled. We have 2 underway, one in Virginia and one in Iowa that I can share more information about. And then lastly, some ways to get involved on the national level. Like Mark mentioned, helping to support our various campaign efforts to nationalize a fully funded GusNIP program, national campaign efforts to strengthen stocking standards, increasing federal funding of TFAP and farm to food banking. And then of course, the NANA steering committee would always welcome support from GIH and SAFSF members to underwrite just some of the costs of running that alliance. Okay, that's all for me, and I'll turn it back over to Maggie.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Joelle. I think that was a really wonderful and engaging list of ways that funders on this call and throughout GIH and SAFSF can really engage around. And I just wanted 2 quick reminders. We'll definitely be sharing the slides from today as well as the recording. So don't stress if you didn't get to write down all of the wonderful things that Joelle just mentioned. And I also just wanted to mention right after Anand finishes, which Anand, I think you might, if you have to leave at 3:15, that's perfectly fine. We will have a question and answer session. So just a reminder to pop your questions in the chat. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Anand. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Maggie. I will share my screen. Let's see. Okay. And I'm good on time, Maggie, but I'll try to be brief. I know I think we want to get into the Q&A, but thanks to all of you for convening this important conversation. I also want to just thank Mark and Joelle for just the incredible work both Fair Food Network and CSPI and the NANA Coalition is doing on the ground, as well as their advocacy work. It's just really, really important. So thank you to them. I'll be probably covering similar themes and providing some similar recommendations to them, but also share some granular recommendations from a recent bipartisan task force that BPC convened. So over the last 2 years, we put together a bipartisan group made up of an array of different stakeholders to address a series of issues. One, COVID-19 and food insecurity. The second related to child nutrition programs, which were up for reauthorization last year. And then most recently, looking at the SNAP program to try to identify opportunities that both advance access to food and tackling issues related to hunger, but also addressing issues related to poor diet as well as nutrition. And as you see here, Jose Andres, Dan Glickman, Ann Veneman, 2 former ag secretaries, and Leslie Saracen co-chaired this group, again, sort of a broad-based group covering several different sectors. And we released the first two reports in September 2021 and January 2022. But what I want to focus on in the few minutes that I have is really the third and final report that we recently released related to recommendations for the Farm Bill vis-a-vis the SNAP program. And I can, in the chat right after we're done, send you a link to the actual recommendations, but I thought I'd cover some of the high-level ones here with you as well. I think this has already been covered by the speakers. Again, why the nutrition title is so important here. It's expected to comprise 85% of total Farm Bill spending this year, and most of this is for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. And so when I think it was Colin or Mark had mentioned that even food producers want to see a strong nutrition title, I think everyone realizes that's not SNAP is sort of the biggest piece here, and we have to have agreement on the nutrition title for the Farm Bill to proceed forward. That's why it's so important to focus on this. There are a variety of programs under the Farm Bill. Maggie's already covered this. And what I thought I'd do with my time is just in the really 5 areas that BPC's recent task force provided recommendations. I thought I'd give you a sense of the discrete recommendations in each of these 5 areas, so you get a sense of where this group, where their deliberations were, where they came down. I will say at the outset that the recommendations that I'm briefly going to touch on in each of these 5 areas, we have now shared them with the Hill, and several of them have price tags with them. I think that the context, Mark outlined pretty well. I think it's going to be hard to really plus up a lot of these programs. You can make the argument that when the economy improves over the next few years, perhaps the costs for the overall program will come down. You make the argument that perhaps if some of these things happen and food insecurity reduces, nutrition security improves, potentially there could be savings on the healthcare side. But there are some costs to many of these recommendations, and I think for that reason, I think the initial reception that we've got has been stronger from the Democratic side as opposed to the Republican side. But I think that there are things here, sort of both sides could potentially be for. So the first area focused on SNAP eligibility, benefit levels, and program administration. I want to run through just some of the high-level recommendations so you get a sense of where the task force came down. They recommended that, as required by the 2018 Farm Bill, that U.S. states should continue to reevaluate what's called the Thrifty Food Plan every 5 years and annually update benefit levels for inflation. This is really to ensure benefit adequacy. They also recommended that Congress should streamline and simplify program requirements, program administration, and data sharing. And this is, again, really to increase access to SNAP. They recommended that Congress should expand SNAP and SNAP-Ed to the territories, so the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, American Samoa, the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, in place of the current program, which is called the Nutrition Assistance Program, which are block grants. The group also recommended Congress should expand SNAP benefits to college students, immigrant communities subject to a waiting period, people in the military. So really advancing racial equity here, supporting underserved communities. And then finally, with respect to work requirements and employment training, the group recommended that Congress should enhance SNAP employment and training programs through continued evaluation of existing programs and pilot programs. The task force recognized, with respect to work requirements, the administrative complexities and challenges for beneficiaries with respect to the current work requirements, but did not make a specific recommendation in this brief. And perhaps we can talk more about work requirements and some of the discussions on the Hill and some of the follow-on work that we've done in this area. The second sort of area that the group focused on was nutrition and eligible foods in SNAP. The group recommended that Congress consider a new pilot program providing a new monthly cash value benefit for SNAP participants for fruits and vegetables in all forms, similar to what exists for WIC. They also recommended scaling and expanding the existing GusNIP nutrition incentive and produce prescription programs to reach additional participants by making the program permanent and increasing funding to at least $1 billion or 1% of SNAP expenditures. I think as you heard from some of the other speakers, there was also a recommendation to enhance the program and potentially include decreasing or eliminating the non-federal matching requirement for grantees and lower resource communities. There was a recommendation that Congress and USDA should strengthen stocking standards for SNAP authorized retailers to better align with the dietary guidelines for Americans. Recommendations also related to creating a robust coordinated SNAP Ed program, promoting nutrition education and nutritious food choices by doubling funding for SNAP Ed and better integrating it with other federal and state government programs. Oftentimes right now, it's sort of in a silo or in a vacuum and not well integrated with other programs that are trying to do similar things. The group also made a series of recommendations related to data collection and research. I think these are quite important that Congress and USDA should invest in a robust research and data collection strategy to identify opportunities to improve nutrition in SNAP. That Congress should require USDA to regularly collect data from all federal nutrition programs to measure alignment with improvements in dietary quality and food security for participants. And specifically that every 2 years, the USDA should report on the quality of SNAP participants' diets using science-based metrics, such as USDA's Healthy Eating Index. So getting a better idea of what we call this the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. How well are we doing with respect to really enhancing nutrition? Third area, focused on SNAP integrity, technology, and retailer considerations. Some of the recommendations that were put forth that USDA, the Office of the Inspector General, and states continue to ensure program integrity and protect federal investment and public support for SNAP. The USDA work with states to provide technical assistance to implement what's called the National Accuracy Clearinghouse. So the system is effective across all states. Congress should also authorize the online purchasing pilot as a permanent program and increase equitable access to and promote nutrition through online purchasing. The group also recommended that Congress allow SNAP benefits to be used to cover online shopping transaction, delivery, monthly membership, or other fees up to a certain limit, such as $10 per month per SNAP participant. And to promote nutritious food purchases, that funding should be provided for retailers to provide incentives to SNAP participants to make healthy food purchases when purchasing online and in stores. So really aligning incentives here, both for consumers as well as retailers. The fourth area focused on food distribution programs. Some of the top line recommendations here from the group were that Congress should increase TFAP entitlement funding by $250 million annually, adjusted for inflation, and make programmatic changes to improve the nutritional quality of foods, increase access to the program, and ease administrative burden. To support the distribution of fresh and frozen foods, Congress should reauthorize and annually appropriate at least $200 million for TFAP administrative grants for storage and distribution, and $15 million for TFAP infrastructure grants to allow for better transport of foods and to increase the distribution of nutritious foods that require temperature control. A couple of the other key recommendations here: Congress should reauthorize the food distribution program on Indian reservations, allow Native American families to simultaneously use both SNAP as well as this food distribution program. To better address the needs of older adults, Congress should allow USDA to update what's called the Commodity Supplemental Food Program to allow more older adults to participate in the program. And finally, that Congress should work with USDA to improve food and nutrition security across food distribution programs through pilot programs, changes in procurement strategies, and research studies on progress and barriers. And then the final category of recommendations looked at some of the other programs beyond SNAP, and as you see here, there are recommendations related to providing necessary funding and approval to expand fresh fruit and vegetable programs to all elementary schools that participate in the community eligibility provision. that Congress should also provide further funding and approval to expand this program to all middle and high schools that participate in community eligible provision. Also, to increase access to the Senior Farmers Market Nutrition Program, Congress should reauthorize and increase funding for the program to allow for program expansion and increased benefit level. And then finally, that Congress should reauthorize funding for the Healthy Food Financing Initiative, really an important way to get grocery stores and other healthy stores in underserved communities, food deserts, and to reauthorize funding at or above current levels to continue to support projects to attract fresh, healthy food retailers that accept SNAP benefits. So an array of recommendations. This gives you a sense of sort of the breadth of areas that the task force considered in its deliberations. Again, many of these do have a price tag, and I think in the context that we're on, some of these are going to be heavier lifts than others. Out of all of these priorities, our sister organization, BPC Action, like Fair Food Network and like CSPI and NANA Coalition, are focusing on a couple of key areas. GusNIP is really one of the key ones that we're also focusing in. And I think really, from our perspective, we talk about putting the N back in SNAP, but even in this sort of difficult context and difficult environment we're in, really trying to ensure that diet quality is a core part of the SNAP program, really a core part of the Farm Bill. I think is really important, reiterating that on both sides of the aisle, both chambers of Congress, is really important. So with that, Maggie, I'll turn it back over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anand. And yeah, you can stop sharing your screen whenever works for you. But yeah, thank you so much to our three really fantastic speakers. I know that was an incredible amount of great information. I think someone asked in the chat, which we responded to, but yes, we will be making the slides available. Thank you for checking. I'm excited to review the slides myself after this. But yeah, as we mentioned, now we have we have till 3:30 Eastern for the rest of this call. So we do have a good bit of time for some discussion and some question and answer. So please feel free to pop your questions in the chat and we can talk through them as we go. Colin, I have a couple questions that we could easily start off with, but also if you have a burning question, please feel free to ask it too.
Absolutely, but go right ahead. Kick us off.
Okay, sounds good. But yeah, I know our three speakers, I think, did a great job of talking about their current engagement on the Hill, whether through marker bills and kind of, general grassroots advocacy. So I'm curious if, this can be directed to each one of you, if you wanted to talk through some of the offices in Congress that you're really working with to advance some of the policies and priorities that you talked about today. Whoever wants to go first.
I'm happy to jump in and start. Great question, Maggie. So for fruit and vegetable nutrition incentives, I guess I'll start on the House side and talk a little bit about the last campaign we had wasn't actually the Farm Bill, it was for emergency funding for COVID response. And we led an effort to secure $51 million in emergency funding. These programs had fixed budgets. They were seeing a doubling of demand. And so it was a really challenging time. And also they were very well situated to respond during the pandemic. In the House, we had a Dear Colleague letter. So a letter between two members of Congress encouraging support for the program and the emergency funding. That was led by Rick Crawford from Arkansas, who's the Republican on the Ag Committee, and Dan Kildee from Michigan, the Democrat from Michigan. So that was a bipartisan letter. There were 25 Republicans that signed on, including G.T. Thompson and a number of Republicans who've been or are on the Ag Committee. We're on Nutrition Subcommittee. Don Bacon signed on. And 55 Democrats. So we kind of have that like starting list and starting champions. And so we're having some very productive conversations right now with both Kildee and Crawford's office. I would characterize those as at a sensitive point of negotiation, but we're very hopeful that we can have both Dan Kildee and Rick Crawford as our bipartisan leads in the House. Still kind of early in that process. They have to get to a certain level of agreement. So that's why I characterize it as a bit of a sensitive point. But we do know that we've got a tremendous amount of support, certainly from the Democratic side, for advancing GusNIP and the priorities, including Jim McGovern's office. On the Senate side, of course, being Michigan-based and having a long-term relationship with Senator Stabenow, the chair of the Senate Ag Committee, we've certainly always relied on her champion of the program. As we head into this farm bill, though, usually committee chairs don't necessarily want to lead on marker bills, and so they have asked us to work with actually Senator Warnock's office. So Senator Warnock is the Democratic office in the Senate that we're hoping to work with very closely on this. And we're actually kind of in the hunt for a Republican office at this point. We've had some promising conversations. I think there's just a lot about the bipartisan approach to the program and those broad impacts that has made it attractive over the years. The challenge is, Republicans in this environment of hyper fiscal responsibility and the debt ceiling negotiations, their comfort level coming out with a program that's asking for a significant increase in funding. So we may have champions in bipartisan efforts that may not necessarily have the funding component in it where we want it. But we're hopeful then that when we get to conference, that we have enough champions that will be supportive if there is funding available at that point. And we've also heard from Republicans who are supportive, but have indicated they're not necessarily going to be able to be publicly supportive. And so that's why we're also hopeful when we get to conference that those members would then be willing to jump on and even plus up funding. So that's kind of just a real quick update on what the legislative champion landscape looks like for GusNIP.
Awesome, thank you. Go ahead, Joel.
Oh, yeah, I can add just a little bit for some of the other priorities that I mentioned. For stocking standards, we have found that most Dems and specifically Thune's office were pretty interested in that approach. We're still looking for, for all of our priorities, we're still actively meeting with offices and trying to identify champions. But with, like Mark mentioned, we're actively lobbying Stabenow and Bozeman, as they're the Senate Ag chairs, on all of our top priorities, but specifically on research, on the research and the additional money for nutrition security demonstration pilots. So we have a pilot happening in Virginia, or we're starting a pilot in Virginia, and they were successful with getting letters of support from Booker's office and from Senator Warner. And then, so I think those are pretty much the main highlights right now.
Yeah, I'll just add that we've been, when we released a report in January, I just put that in the chat, we had minority and majority staff, both in the House and the Senate at committees. And I think we've been working with sort of those four. Certainly there are other champions there from Senator in the Senate side, Cory Booker, Mike Braun, as well as others, but really trying to assist committee staff in both the House and Senate. That's where we're focused.
Awesome, thank you for that update. That's really helpful. It's also a lot of the folks we're thinking about for meetings with our Hill Day at our forum in June, which I'll talk a little bit about at the end of the call. But yeah, please, if anyone else has any questions, like we said, you can honestly at this point, I think, feel free to come off mute and ask them. But Colin, if you have a question too, I can pass it to you.
Yeah, well, that's a lot of information to digest. But I'd be curious. I mean, obviously, a lot of the conversation, of course, is around SNAP funding levels. But I think each of you alluded to that there are certainly recommendations or things that you're thinking about that wouldn't necessarily be tied to increased funding streams that might, but possibly would have some significant impacts on community. So I'm just curious, are there some things that you are advocating for that are flying under the radar that you think might have a better hopes, and see how maybe there'll be those Republicans and others that might be able to give more of the private support and won't necessarily run afoul of the hyper fiscal conservatives in conference, or I'm just curious if there's some of those little small things that aren't really getting attention that you're kind of hopeful for that might have a big impact down the road.
I think I mentioned this when I was giving my presentation, but yeah, we feel pretty confident that we'll see something in this farm bill related to metrics and reporting and a definition for nutrition security. USDA has already made that like a pretty clear priority of theirs. They've put out a working definition, and we know kind of behind the scenes that there is some work happening to establish those metrics. We're waiting to hear what that would look like in terms of reporting, like frequency and what kinds of reports that we'd see the information in. But I think that'll go a long way to, I mean, it seems like a small step, but having an agreed upon definition and formalized valid metrics and requirements in place for reporting means that nutrition security will become like a regular part of the conversation around SNAP. So I mean, I don't know how steeped in the dialogue people are on this call about the kind of tensions that we run into sometimes between the differences between food security and nutrition security. But it does pose a challenge in the advocacy space sometimes. And so I think having this agreed upon language will hopefully bridge some of the divides that currently exist and help advance both of these very important topics for people who participate in SNAP.
Go ahead, Anand.
Go ahead, Mark.
I was just going to add, Colin, in some conversations, again, with the Republican side and leadership side in the Ag Committee, I think there is a very genuine interest in trying to understand the health impacts of programs, what that means also for, Medicare, Medicaid costs. So, from the public health perspective, I think there's a very strong interest in, programs that are effective, programs that are proven, and programs that you can point to as having the outcomes that our program goals, and also really, if there's, a strong return on investment and at the end of the day, a pathway to addressing the ever increasing cost of healthcare. So I think those are all very relevant areas that they would like to engage in as well.
Yeah, I'll just add, I think Joel's point is a really important one. Again, I mean, it's called the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, and at some point you have to call the question and ask, is this really a nutrition program? And to date, it has not been. It's just been on the edges. We've been doing it. So I think really honing in on metrics, that's a great way of ensuring that people are thinking about this not as sort of it's a side thing, but this is really the core of the program. There are other things that we'd like to see, whether it's retailer stocking standards or better data data collection, things that aren't necessarily costers that I think could potentially move the sort of the nutrition ball down the court. So hopefully there, some of these things can be incorporated that don't have a big price tag.
Thank you for that. I was going to say, I'm hoping we'll get some more questions here in chat. I don't know if Maggie, if you've gotten anything just directly to you. Otherwise, I've probably at least got one or two more questions. So, I don't know, Maggie, or if you've got a question.
Yeah, I mean, I have a couple too, but yeah, please feel free to go for it. I can maybe we can do one more each if there isn't any other folks wanting to ask.
Yeah, so again, I know it's early days, but I know kind of going back to some of my earlier comments, that sort of one of the big tensions I know around SNAP has been, sort of whether there should be nutritional requirements in terms of what can SNAP dollars be applied towards. And so I'm curious to hear from the three of you whether you feel that sort of that particular policy question is going to be prominent in the debates and sort of among advocates this Farm Bill, or is that maybe perhaps going to be tabled in light of just other larger, more pressing issues? And either way, I'd just be curious to know sort of what you think, sort of what that might mean for the Farm Bill moving forward.
Gerald, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to start. It doesn't seem right now like it's going to be an incredibly, top of mind issue, although things could change as we get closer to September. I think that, so far as Mark has pointed out, the conversation has really just been like higher level about, trying to just protect the program as it is, control costs, and we haven't gotten into kind of the nitty gritty yet. But I think that will come as things get closer to September. But CSPI's position on this topic has remained and is so with this Farm Bill that we really can't answer the question about any kind of policy change until we have more evidence, like looking into what different proposals, looking at the impact of different proposals. So there has been a lot of discussion over the years about taking soda out of SNAP, for example, and would that improve diet quality for participants? There's a lot to unpack in that conversation around choice and dignity of participants, what participants themselves want, and the public health impacts and outcomes is just one of the many important considerations in that topic. As you probably can guess, you've got pretty strong opinions on this, depending if you are more aligned with anti-hunger organizations or if you're more aligned with public health organizations. CSPI's position and what we are recommending in this Farm Bill and beyond is that this question has come up so often in the last several years. I don't think we're ever going to properly put it to rest until we do the research. And we also don't think that a policy recommendation should be put forth on anything relating to inclusion, foods that are included and excluded in SNAP until there is a more solid evidence base. There is extremely limited evidence right now as to the impact that these strategies would have. No studies have been done with SNAP participants themselves. It's all the few randomized controlled trials that have looked at this have been with people who are eligible but not participating in SNAP. And we know that there are pretty significant differences in people who participate and people who do not. So it's not the best proxy, but it's the best we can get without a waiver from USDA that would allow us to actually test these strategies with SNAP participants. The next best research that we have are modeling studies, which have their own limitations. So that's why one of our top Farm Bill priorities is to make some mandatory funds available for demonstration pilots that would include the ability to pilot test some kind of combination of fruit and vegetable incentives paired with a sugary beverage reduction strategy to see what kind of impact that would have on food security and diet quality, but maintaining that any approach like that, even if it's a pilot test, would need to be done so in a way that does not increase stigma or reduce participation in the program by SNAP participants or by retailers. So I could talk at length about it. It's very complicated, but that's the position that our organization has.
Yeah, I'll just start where Joelle ended in that, and we have also made a very similar recommendation, at least our task force did, about the importance of state pilots. And USDA has not in the past approved these state pilots, either in Democratic or Republican administrations. And there could be valid reasons for that, but we really do need the data. As Joelle said, right now we're limited to modeling data. I will say that the modeling data is pretty strong, and the data that we do have, that actually not restrictions, but a combination of incentives and disincentives could really offer the best pathway. And in fact, polling data also suggests from SNAP participants themselves, not just the general public, but SNAP participants themselves, that they'd be open to disincentives paired with incentives. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there, but these demonstrations and pilots need to happen, and they haven't happened in the past. And I think, if there was some way that the Farm Bill could allow for these demonstrations, we could get more data. And I think ultimately that would overcome, my hypothesis is that will ultimately overcome both sort of the choice as well as sort of the dignity, equity arguments that you often hear from others. I personally think both are wrong. Both sides of the aisle are incorrect by not moving forward. I think that's inequitable, and I think as an important government program, we need to do what the program is titled to do, which is improve nutrition. So I usually am the one trying to push the envelope here, because I think we need to do more. But as Joelle said, I think the first step here is getting more demonstrations and more pilots out there, and that'd be great if the Farm Bill is able to do that.
Awesome. Thank you so much to you both for answering that question. I'm glad you asked that, Colin. That was on my list as well. We only have 2 minutes left, but Ann Mills actually put the question that I was going to ask in the chat, which is great. We read each other's minds, Ann. So her question really quickly to anyone that's up for answering it is, do you see some of the SNAP moves by state legislatures, Iowa, for instance, which has just passed a bill in the state legislature to kind of increase asset requirements and regular program eligibility checks affect the Farm Bill debate? And if you have time, I think maybe touching on how much control states have over implementation of SNAP 2 would be great.
I'm just going to throw my opinion out there on just how this might impact what's be done in the Farm Bill. If anything, it might provide some ideas for legislators, but I don't think that the environment we're working in here in Washington mirrors, where those will be passed, like in states like Iowa. So many of these things are going to be dead on arrival on the Senate side and with the president. And, what's interesting, though, is to see how they're approaching that right now. The focus really, as you see, I just saw an update where McCarthy has put out his debt relief plan. So we should start seeing some actual details of what the Republicans in the House are proposing. But the focus has been around work requirements. And so they're trying to, there's an effort to try and get at shrinking the program through increased requirements versus, some of the things that are being done on the state level. So I don't know. I don't think that what happened in Iowa will impact the Farm Bill process.
Great. Great. Well, it looks like we are right at 3:30 Eastern. So I think we'll wrap it up there. I just want to give another huge thank you to our speakers today. I think that was an incredible amount of information. I learned a lot. I'm really excited to dig into the slides, which, as I mentioned, we'll definitely send out along with a recording. And yeah, just really, really excited. Thank you. Thank you all for joining. And hope to see you at our upcoming webinars and at our forum. I will send a link out about that as well, which will include a Hill Day component, and we hope to see many of you there and kind of helping us engage around some of these issues. Thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate your time. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Maggie. Thanks, Colin.